Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and tonight I am here just to help you relax, to drift off to sleep by the sound of the waves, like the whispers of old souls. I know you have come to this video not just to hear the story, but also to find a deep, peaceful sleep. But before we begin, please gently like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to tell you strange stories under the dim moonlight. Where are you from? And what time is it where you live? Just relax. Let your body relax. Put all your worries down by your pillow. Let me take you into a world of mysteries where the wind and the waves mingle, and unsolved mysteries are waiting to be told. Are you ready? Forever haunted. I know. I have to run. Get away. But as yet, haven't the courage. I am in the corner, huddled, naked. I'm more colorful than any clothes I could wear. I'm red, black, purple, and blue, battered and bruised, my crime inquiring about his whereabouts. Together for 6 years now, our beautiful son asleep upstairs, and I'm not entitled, according to him, to ask him anything. I am not and never will be the boss of him. I'm replaying my actions and conversation over and over again. He's never raised his hand to me before. Verbal abuse, yes. Threats, yes. But never until now, connection physically. I realize this didn't just spring up out of nowhere. For weeks now, it's been building money worries, new baby, never having lived together before. He can't handle it. He can't even handle the thought of being a dad. He acts as if he hates him. I believe he's jealous of him. Maybe it's just a one-off, I tell myself. I wipe my nose, and my hands are covered in snot, tears, and blood. I have to get up. I have got a baby to look after. He can't see me like this. I need to shower. I can wash away the blood, but never will I be able to wash away the shock and fear I felt. He hasn't gone near me since the birth, and last night, with the first punch, his erection appeared. It grew the more he hit me. The names he called me, the force he used. I can't tell my parents. They didn't want me to move in with him in the first place. I'm 19. I had told them, an adult and a new mom with a fella that adores me. I'll be fine. How can I now go back and tell them they were right? It's now 4 months on and middle of summer, and I'm clad in a woolly, oversized sweater which hides a multitude. He's got clever and hits me in places which can be hidden from everyone, but he doesn't hide his beatings from his son. In fact, I think he waits until he's asleep in my lap sometimes to start. He knows I'm more afraid of him hurting him than me. Yesterday, something in me snapped. I'm not taking anymore. My son's not taking it anymore. We both deserve better. In walks the oppressor. I usually sit, waiting to suss out his mood before I do anything, but not today. I carry on reading a book. Paul's asleep in his cot, oblivious. He glares at me, walks into the kitchen, and comes storming back. Where's my tea? You know what time I get in at, and my tea and dinner should be already prepared, sitting on the table, waiting for me. Paul and I have already eaten, and since the last time I prepared food, it ended up all over me and the kitchen. I've decided I won't be doing that anymore. His face is incredulous. In any other situation, it would be hilarious, actually. Even now, it's hilarious. I start to giggle and can't stop. Nothing could have stopped it. Have you finally lost the plot? Stupid bitch. What's funny? I stand up and ask him, for once, can we take our fight into a different room and let the baby sleep in peace? I start walking before he gets a chance to respond. He comes in, arm raised, and stops midair as he catches sight of the carving knife in my hand. I slice and only succeed in ripping his shirt. He starts apologizing, the only time since the first time. Tells me he loves me. He'll never hit me again. I can feel my resolve breaking and need to get to my son. I start walking and he grabs me. The knife clatters to the floor. I knew there and then I was going to pay for this. Big time. He goes in and wakes up. Paul puts the disturbed toddler in his walking chair and hands him the knife. I beg him to take it off him, but he walks over to me and spits in my face. I tell him I'll do anything he wants, that I love him, but just take the knife off the baby. He pushes me on my knees and makes me go on all fours and rapes me while my son gurgles and plays with the knife. Not a scream or whimper do I make, but hum and make soothing noises so Paul won't get alarmed. When he's finished, he gets up and urinates on me and Paul. I've never known such hate and haven't experienced it on the same level since. When he leaves the next day, I pack up all his stuff and our stuff. I ring my parents and beg them to get me out of there and plead with them, can I come home? I hear my mother sobbing in the background, and my dad says, darling, we've been dying for this call. It killed us the last time when you asked us to leave and not come back. We'll be there right away. I never told them about the rapes, too ashamed, but the latest beatings were obvious. You only had to look at me. The drive home is terrifying and soothing at the same time. I knew I'd done too much growing up. I could never go back to the girl that lived with Mammy and Daddy again. I wasn't the same girl. He killed himself in a prison cell. I didn't send him there. It was an awful crime committed on someone else. It was a twisted relief, knowing Paul would never have to see him, and a twisted sadness because he'd been my first love. And for a long time, I adored him. Time and life move on. Scars heal. Hope returns. But your past is always your past, and a part of me will be haunted forever. Take me. I no longer wanted to live my life, but neither did I wish to die. So I resisted the temptation of the eternal abyss, knowing that any afterlife would hold no consolation. In effect, choosing a living death, achieved by numbing my senses against the world and disappearing within. By day, it was books, movies, video games, anything to place my mind in the body of another, transporting my consciousness to a plane where there were strict rules, and the main character always triumphed, as opposed to the uncertainty of my own existence. Rarely did I surface from fantasy, and only when my body demanded it absolutely necessary. The sun never graced my flesh, and the air of my sealed chamber weighed heavy with my own musk. I was a fully grown woman, living as a teenage boy, and I didn't care. By night, it was a chemical affair. Amber spirit of any form or flavor would achieve my goal, as long as it was served with ice in its heart. Taste was a luxury I could ill afford, not after losing my career to sheer apathy. It no longer seemed of any import whether digital numbers fell in line with invented targets. The whole world operated on an imaginary system of credit that existed only because we said it did. Anything outside of a practical vocation for which I no longer had time or patience to learn felt like playing pretend and a waste of life. My usual haunt was a quiet dive bar at the end of my city block. Its proximity, the only deciding factor, limiting the expedition home to a straight line stumble. That night, I spent as any other, nursing a tumbler and examining the slow melt of the frozen shards it protected. "Time for one last round, sweetheart?" Frank asked, ducking his head into my line of sight. He was a kind soul. Despite the tattoo-covered biceps, large enough to toss me out like a rag doll, he always let me brood in peace. Watching my back and moving on any would-be suitors, the apparent ruffian doted on me with a brotherly worry. He never denied my cash, though. While busy at weekends, the quiet, dead-end joint couldn't afford to turn away drunks the rest of its working days. I felt at times to be single-handedly paying the poor guy's wage. "Always," I answered, offering up my low-tide glass and a half-hearted smile. As he poured, I glanced across the room. There were a few men in suits, clearly avoiding their homes and wives. A couple of tourists just looking for a warm place to rest, and a scattering of solitary older women. They, like me, I assumed, had nowhere else to go, no one to return to, and nothing to live for, aside from the never-ending goal of forgetting. I'd had it all. not so long ago, I had been lucky enough to know love and comfort. However, my good fortune was stolen away by one solitary word, printed in black ink on a medical chart. That word had ripped my future away and burned it to ash for good measure, leaving me here in my perpetual endeavor to avoid my own existence. Holed up at the corner booth, he was there. As always, my constant, silent drinking buddy. Every night he arrived like clockwork in a pressed black shirt and pants with shining black boots. His midnight wardrobe offset only by the pale ivory of his skin and the crimson of his lips. Ordering a single jar of bourbon, which would never grace his tongue, there he stoically remained, silently surveying the room. I had never even seen him rise to use the bathroom. How he managed to leave several times a week with a different conquest on his arm, I had no idea. Girl or guy, it didn't seem to matter to him. They just flocked to his side, like magnets being drawn together. With only a look, he seemed to seduce a target with an hour or less of minimal effort. He then escorted them out the door for what I only assumed to be a night of intense pleasure. He was certainly handsome, in a clean-cut way, but he had never directed his gaze at me or any of the other regulars. It was always the passing through that succumbed. Alaric was his name, according to Frank. In spite of his blatant philandering, I couldn't help but imagine he treated his prey with more humanity that I had been dealt by the man I once loved. That cursed filth had proclaimed to love me. The putrid liar had promised me protection. The venomous snake had abandoned me at my most vulnerable. One word was all it took to break our bond, shatter his oath completely. One printed word, voiced in clinical monotone under fluorescent lights. The word that tore my future to shreds and sent my beloved in search of a more suitable mate, infertile. I had been told I was still grieving, and knew it to be true. My depression, spiced with anger, told a traditional tale. What I considered a lie was that it would end in an accepted peace. How could it, when my natural immortality had been ripped away? Any harmony I would have found in life would have risen from knowing my memory, and soul would have persisted through the generations that came after me. Anecdotes told of my character to grandchildren and onward, keeping me alive in thought, my name on a branch of an ever-expanding tree. Instead, there would be no furthering of my story. It would end when I did. So why not just get it over with? Any experiences gained would be lost to time anyway. So why bother? Why expend all that energy on impermanence? I should have just ended the torment that day, when my forehead had been stamped with pointless, There were only two reasons I held back from instigating the end. One was the fear that any afterlife would be purposed with watching over loved ones, for which I had none. So it would tally that I would be no better off than I was now. The other was Alaric, and the solution I had begun to suspect he could offer me. My quest to lose myself in various media had educated me thoroughly in the ways of the vampire, the desperate young girl in need of connection, an outcast from the society surrounding her. Ill-fitting in the living world, she would always come across a creature of the night who would welcome her into his ranks, usually with sultry and salacious single-mindedness. Alas, if Alaric was what I suspected him to be, he ignored me, perhaps because my clouded mind was reaching for a fantasy solution to a real-life problem. Most likely, he was only a strange-looking man with a talent for seduction. Regardless, I couldn't shake the idea. Too many aspects of his regular attendance pointed to the supernatural. If I was wrong, all I would achieve was appearing like the drunk I had become, which was small consequence to risk being proven right. "Good evening, Alaric," I slurred, and slid onto the red velvet bench beside him. "Do I know you?" he asked in a soft English accent. His slow and steady speech belayed a calm in direct contrast to my harsh American. "Not officially, but I've sat at that bar every night for several weeks, watching you. So I believe I know you very well." "Oh?" he asked, waiting for me to fill the space. "I know what you are," I whispered, in the way that inebriated people do when they believe themselves subtle. "And what is that?" he said, smiling as if humoring a toddler. The feeling of being infantilized by a look sent waves of submission through me. It made me feel safe under his powerful gaze, willing to surrender control into his adept hands. Returning to a childlike state would allow me to release the expectations I had placed on myself to assume parenthood, which only solidified my resolve to follow my intended course of action. "Vampire," I blurted. I did not want to drag this out into a feature film of suspect and intrigue. I wanted my answer and solution that night. The sooner, the better. His reaction was as expected. A hearty laugh, but one that did not convince his eyes that my accusation was truly funny. "Does such a thing exist?" he asked of me. I did not believe so until I happened upon you. I see you taking victims, always transients, who never return. You never drink, never eat, never use the bathroom. You are pale, intense, clothed in black, and I have only ever seen you at night. Perhaps I am simply peculiar, he offered. Perhaps. I nodded. I think it worth looking the fool to discover the truth. He responded, never breaking his eye contact. His intense stare examining every facet of me via the portal of my irises. It felt as though he flayed me from the outside until his scrutiny fell upon my vulnerable soul. I now understood how he seduced so many, so quickly. "I wish you to turn me," I said, interrupting his gaze before I fell completely at his feet. My life has lost all meaning with the living, and I would greet death but for the fear of further loneliness. I see a single solution for one who would not live but does not wish to die. So please, take me with you into immortality. Follow me, he said, and rose, striding to the doors without looking back to see if I followed. He must have been as certain as I was that I would. Ignoring a disapproving look from Frank, I made my way across the room to the exit. I pursued my immediate master out of the bar and through dark alleys that all smelled of refuse and rats. Stumbling to remain on his heels, I signaled my deference like a dog called to attend. He stopped suddenly, turning and reaching a strong arm around my waist, and in one motion, pressing me against the scorched wall of a building. Dumpsters, boxes, and crates now blocked my view of anything but him. "You would submit to your impulse?" he asked, his lips pressed to my ear and his hand against my chest, pinning me in place against the cold bricks. I could feel his heavy breaths quickening in lust, his hand quivering where it rested between my breasts. Whether it was from desire for my blood or body, I still did not know. The chance of stretching my living death into infinity was worth giving him either. "You would succumb to my will?" he asked again. "Break from this life and join me in whatever comes next?" "Yes!" I screamed in ecstasy, feeling excitement and promise for the first time since that word had plunged me into darkness. "Take me, please. Take me away from this temporary world." Sudden pain and cold followed, his dead cheeks pressing against my neck and his teeth puncturing my jugular. My warm blood mixed with his icy touch, like boiling soup spilt on a snowy mountain. I closed my eyes and writhed in anticipation of the immortality I sought. Eventually, he pulled back. The world swam and swirled as my head felt as but a feather. I saw his chin stained brown with my dried blood. How long had I given myself to this creature? The low light of the alley weighed down on my senses. The rotten smell of the trash bags assaulted, and without his hard body pressed against mine, I felt exposed. Will it happen now?" I managed to mutter through the disorientation, my eyes rolling and unable to focus on his beautiful face. "Will you die? Yes? Will you turn?" I doubt it, he said, sneering down at me. Somehow he had grown tall, or I had fallen. I did not know which was more real. I am a predator, not some romanticized, dangerous lover to be tamed, as this age loves to depict. You are nothing but prey. I have no desire to intentionally turn game, as I am sure you would not share your bed with a cow. He spun on his heels and stalked into the night, with no further words or explanation. I was alone, crumpled amongst the filth, dying in the dark. I had not the energy to fear, only regret the trust I had placed in a monster I had not understood. As my eyelids grew heavier and the cold seeped deeper, I began to long for those temporary years, the moments I was so willing to throw away, for all the time I could have had for myself, the experiences I could have taken as my own without concern of their lasting, for the lives I could have affected, but now never would. Perhaps the next plane would offer more than I had imagined. I did not intend to waste the chance again. If it did, I closed my eyes and waited for whatever would come next, accepting in peace that I had ushered in my own end by ungratefully reaching for more than I had been gifted. Gardener's world, you've chosen a good time to pay me a visit. I've pulled up some pretty decent leeks this morning, got some lovely onions in the store, and a rosemary bush that is totally oblivious to all the nonsense that seems to have befallen our world. My garden really has been my savior, my little farm. I can grow what I need and get by very nicely on what my garden supplies. I do wish I'd had a better crop of carrots. I used the finest bone meal fertilizer, but they were a total bust this year. My soil is a little too heavy for them, too much clay. But it's the carrot fly that really did for them. They said our biggest enemy was the sickness. Then they tried to say it was the foreign governments. Then it was all about misinformation and the enemy within. But I survived because I knew all along my only real enemy is carrot fly. When the gas supply was cut off back in 25, I opened up an old fireplace so I could cook on an open flame indoors. Not a pretty job, no power tools, naturally. So, me and Axe had to do most of the heavy work, hacking out the wall they'd used to gag the old hearth. I like it though. The exercise, solving problems, working out a plan to get me to the next crop. Most of the stuff we've lost, I didn't care for anyway. You're lucky today with the weather. It gets too smoky and hot indoors, even with the chimney. No, on a day like this, we cook al fresco. Something lovely about doing my cooking in the place where I get most of my food. I'm a man of nature. That's what I am. You saw my roses on the way in, didn't you? It's the roses and the raspberry canes that bring people to my garden. I took part of the fence down so people can see them more easily, so they can come in and explore. Fancy that. In times like these, someone actually taking part of a good, strong fence down. Well, there's method to my madness. I like to have visitors. Brought you here to me today, didn't it? Relax. Enjoy the sun. Would you like some water? I've got plenty. Since the neighbors have been thinning out, I've been using their houses' guttering, as well as my own, to collect the rain. Been able to grow in their gardens too. That's why I'm doing so well in these tough times. That's why I can afford to lose a few raspberries to curious, hungry bypassers. Waste nothing and work hard. That's me. Do whatever needs to be done. Please, have some water. But how is he going to cook out here, you ask? A very good question. Let me just remove this old tarp. And ta-da! An old enamel bath. Not as common as they once were. But this beautiful old iron roll top was in my neighbor's place. He was a lawyer in the old days. Fat lot of good that did him. Must have cost a fortune. Weighs a ton. I convinced them to help me carry it here in exchange for some food and water. And here we are, those old claw and ball feet holding it up above my fire. An antique bath sitting on my lawn in the shade of my willow. Heaven, you look a bit concerned. Don't worry about the staining on the sides of the bath. That's inevitable when you cook with direct heat like this. It looks dirty, but it's not. It's just well seasoned from all the grease and juices. I'll just get this fire lit. Thank you for gathering all of this wood, by the way. Told you I'd trade you for water and the raspberries, didn't I? I'm a man of my word. We'll need a couple of buckets of water for the tub. And what else? I think today we'll have a couple of these leeks. No carrots, though. Curse you, carrot fly. And I think we'll have a big, dirty handful of the fresher stems from my gnarly old rosemary bush. Don't worry, the heat will kill the germs. I'll use some of this too. Take a look. It's a pot of fat. My grandma would have called it dripping. You must keep this stuff. It's more valuable than gold, literally, these days. I preserve it whenever I cook. It's full of calories and protein and goodness. It keeps for ages. I've got a cupboard full of it. This is from the last few rabbits I cooked. It's a bit of a cocktail, to be honest. Rabbits, rats, squirrels, street rats, raspberry thieves. Only joking, they weren't thieves. You're not a thief. I can spare a few raspberries. I'm going to get this beautiful stuff, nice and hot, and then get the leeks in there. Then the water and the rosemary. Axe, get over here, you big lump. He looks brutal. but I keep him sharp enough to chop the leeks. Look, he's bright as a sushi knife. I can use him to shave. Look close. There now. A slice of leek you can see through. That will just melt in the fat. My mouth is watering. Did you hear that? I love that sound, that sizzle. The popping twigs under the bath. The first chunk of leek sliding around in there, in all that greasy goodness, hissing and cackling. The sun weeping through the old willow. No more horrible planes overhead. No traffic. No more reports about all the doom and gloom. No more sirens. Just a sizzle and a pop, and the waft of home cooking on the late summer breeze. Potatoes. How could I forget potatoes? I sometimes think I'm losing my mind. Not many of this year's crop left, but this is the best way to use them. They add body. Oh, that was unintentional, sorry. Please don't be upset. Poor taste has no place in my garden. Well, I must say, it's been nice to have someone to talk to other than Axe. It has been a while. The raspberries will be dying off soon, and the roses won't last for much longer after that. I suspect I'll be getting fewer visitors. But never mind. I'm going to have plenty of provisions to keep me strong over the winter. And there's still blackberries out, so you never know. I'll be fine in the house, sleeping in the cellar with Axe. Anyway, looks like we've got a rolling boil going here. So sorry, but it's bath time. One book. Wonder. New York City, 1955. Lonnie White pulled up his collar at a Fifth Avenue bookstore window against the cold. Black patches from lack of sleep lay under his eyes. Snowflakes, each an unkindly tiny angel to his mind, descended in the night. But it wasn't the crystals scurrying down his back that gave him the shudders, nor was it the ice melting in the hollow of his back. It was the overwhelming thought the snow crystals gathered together purposely of one mind, a sentient being. This is not possible, he told himself, but it feels all the same, like crystals of death prescient in their condemnation. He laughed at the poetic twist, coming out of his throat like a choking hack. The absurdity of his mind. The existence of hell is ridiculous. Well-dressed Manhattanites strolled by. Ankle-length dresses, pillbox hats, fedoras, and double-breasted suits. Lights flashed, and horns blared from hulking post-war automobiles, as if crying out to him alone, as if they knew him, were accusing him. Lost in thought, he stared, unblinking, at the best-selling novel on display, Scarlet Streets. A photo of the author, Julia Christensen, was poised on the back cover, a beautiful blonde. Her soft brown eyes radiated an undeniable sexual allure. If a passerby were to listen, which they never did, they might hear Lonnie mumbling at the window as they skirted around him. "A bestseller," he would announce quietly, shaking his head ever so slowly. A bestseller. A young man. Lonnie was as plain could be. He wore jeans under a green military jacket, though he had never been in the service. Neither handsome nor ugly. He was a man no one noticed. And yet, he preferred it that way. A ghost to the world. Anyone who bothered to look closely could see he was deranged in his loneliness. But no one bothered to look at all, much less closely. His only unique quality was that he lived alone in a 30-room Washington Heights castle, north of Manhattan. The medieval structure was inherited when his parents died. The trust paid the taxes and bills, providing him a stipend to live on. He had no family, no need for a job, no need for friends. Occasionally, like now, he would visit what he thought of as his storefront and think back to Julia, his one and only lover. "I loved her," he said to the glass. "I truly did. I'm not a bad person." They had met randomly when they had shared a park bench the previous summer. He had guessed she was an actress, and she had responded with a shy smile as if he had guessed correctly. For some reason, he had mentioned Shakespeare was an actor and a writer. She, of course, had asked if he was a writer. He had admitted this was true, letting his ego lead the way, as men will do when impressing young women. But he felt he was not an authentic writer by any stretch. For this, he had to publish. He simply tapped away on his Smith Corona clipper within his castle tower, his garret, overlooking the Hudson River. Sweating, smoking endless, unfiltered Chesterfields, he pursued his great American novel from a place where his dire imaginings could flow. Julia's eyes had glowed a special admiring look, and he let the inner warmth of another human being bath him. Much to his surprise, they struck a friendship which began with meeting for coffee in the village and eventually moved on to lovemaking in her apartment. One thing he knew for sure was to never bring her to his castle, for then she would know he had risen no higher in life than an unemployed trust fund recipient and was not a successful writer. This was wrong of him, he knew. But what could he do? This beautiful woman gave him the kind of attention he had never had. Is there any actual harm in letting her think better of me than you really are? Is it so bad to go out and embellish your wardrobe with fine suits to be the man you want to be? What if this is your only and last chance to feel a love and sexual embrace you had known only others to have? And so the deception went on until Julia, as any curious woman would, wanted to see what Lonnie had written. The book he had been tinkering away at did exist in a high stack of typed-out white paper, cross-outs, and scribbles. Nobody had ever read it. The book was just the tapping on typewriter keys to burn his time. But as proof he was a writer, he gathered up the stacks of pages, 300 or more, and took them to Julia. He lay them before her as an offering, and so, as the days went on, he would sprawl on her apartment couch while she read through his novel, page by page, hour by hour. "Don't stare at me while I'm reading, silly," Julia would say, never offering her opinion. Each day, he returned panic-stricken to his castle, for his greatest hope, his desperate passion, was that Julia would like the novel. One word from her could save or crush any last vestiges of self-esteem remaining in his lonely life. He paced and paced into the night in his cavernous dining room, biting his nails. "My God, what will she think of my novel?" he thought. "What if she doesn't like it, but she did like it?" And more than just liking it, she had a friend who she thought could publish the work with the oldest publisher in New York, a specialist in suspense and murder. To Lonnie, this seemed beyond comprehension, beyond any imaginings of success he could think of or even dream. Yes, yes," he pleaded. "Anything your friend can do, do." And so he released the pile of pages with Julia to take to her friend. In just 2 short weeks, Julia had word back from Bill. Could Lonnie meet her at her apartment? But it was only later, when she was across from Lonnie in a red leather booth, sipping her gin martini, fresh from their lovemaking, a pink glow glistening on her cheeks, that she said, "I have some news about your book." Lonnie was speechless. He stared, transfixed on her siren's face, her blonde hair cascading in Lonnie's imagination, just the hint of a rise and fall of her breasts under her white blouse. "The manuscript is accepted for publication," she said. This was beyond happiness for Lonnie to hear. The novel, and only from Julia's connections, would become a success. Life was truly grand. "But there is one thing," Julia said, her delicate nails holding a martini glass. "Bill says the marketing of the book is crucial. He won't back it unless we have the right, how did he put it? Image. That's it. The right image." Julia laid out the requirements. "The author needs to be a woman. Me, actually. You have to understand how important this is. Bill says books sell with sexy authors. And you, Lonnie, well, as much as I love you, do you want the book to be successful? It could make a lot of money." At first, Lonnie thought, "No way will I let my book go to a publishing house unless under my name." But then he also thought about what he would walk away from. Lonnie was simply a hobbyist writer. Sure, Now that he knew a publisher was interested, he could send it out to multiple publishers and maybe find someone else. But with Julia as the author, he had something else. He had Julia. He had the last and only pleasure he would ever find in a woman. A woman who would likely be offended if he didn't do things her way. A woman who he didn't want to risk losing. It was decided. Julia Christensen would be the author, Lonnie the ghostwriter. Do you think it would be a good idea to send it out to other publishers? Lonnie asked. Julia bristled, her eyes staring down. Maybe, if you don't trust me. This, of course, settled it. The book came to market, and at first went nowhere, but slowly gained traction as a sleeper with a growing readership. A tragic murder mystery with a twist. Heart-rending, the New York Post book summaries said. And so, in 6 months, the book climbed into the bestsellers and became, by all appearances, a blockbuster. At least it was successful from Lonnie's view. Reading the trades and watching Julia Christensen on the talk shows, the book is a hit. A tremendous hit, Julia said, after dragging her upper teeth against her lower lip. Lonnie stared, mesmerized. They were perched on Julia's new kitchen island. She had explained she needed a nicer apartment in case news people were to follow her home. Image, she explained, was everything. Lonnie fidgeted in his chair. It seems like we should get an advance or something. Julia flipped her right hand as if swiping a bothersome mosquito. All the money went to marketing, dear. Lonnie took in the marble kitchen island, the lavish oriental rugs, the view of Manhattan. Hesitating like she had remembered something, Julia said, "You'll see. The truth is, I wouldn't even have taken this apartment if Bill hadn't insisted. I've never met Bill. Soon, honey, soon. You'll like him." Within a few months, Lonnie was leaving messages for Julia, and she wasn't calling back. What could be wrong? True, it might offend her, but he decided to stop by. How else could he see her, set things right? He knew she was busy, but this was only fair. A man Lonnie had never met answered the apartment door. "My good man, you must be Lonnie," he said. Lonnie could smell greasy hair tonic. The man was lanky, tall, and Lonnie had never seen a human being whose eyes smiled less. "Julia? Lonnie!" Wearing a white robe, loose enough for Lonnie to realize this was all she wore, Julia leaned through the doorway of the kitchen. "I would have called you. Finally, you meet Bill." "Bill? Introduce yourself." But Bill didn't have time as Lonnie swept past him to Julia, who was poking cubes of raw steak and vegetables with a skewer, chopped potatoes, onions, a cucumber. Something rose up in Lonnie, an anger in his chest that grabbed his heart, prevented him from taking a breath as he choked down a venomous, dark taste. Julia could see the anguish in Lonnie's eyes, the naive awareness widening in a little boy's innocence. "What?" You think I'd tie up with a loser? A one-book wonder. You've got nothing, Lonnie. Not even your book. Now get lost. But we stole it, Lonnie. Your book, yes, but more than that, we stole your creative energy, your mind. It wasn't the words she said that ripped through Lonnie's mind. No. It was recognizing the flush on Julia's face that Lonnie so cherished that set him off, causing him to lose himself in an inner roar rising into the front of his brain. A blinding white, Lonnie grabbed the shish kebab skewer and held the back of Julia's head by grabbing her hair with his left hand. He plunged the steel point into Julia's right eye, then slowly thrust the length forward, his head slightly tilting in curiosity at the ease of the pointed steel scrunching through to the rear of her skull. She screamed and fell, with her hands gripping her face. Lonnie yanked out the skewer, and he was no longer slow or curious. He punched the steel again and again into her chest, blood splattering on her white robe. With each thrust, he felt the emptiness of his life, the never having the authentic love of even one woman. It was so ruthlessly unfair. He ignored Bill as he turned to leave. Bill, near catatonic, remained riveted on Julia's crumpled body. Within weeks, Lonnie picked up the New York Post. A sordid murder affair was splashed on the front page. Author Christensen, murder solved. Kennedy gets the chair. The story described a Mr. William Kennedy who pimped for this lady of the evening, Julia Christensen, until she hit it big with her book. The whore who wrote a bestseller, the article said. Just a pimp and his whore, it turned out. A common story on the streets of New York. Lonnie continued to live in his drafty Washington Heights monstrosity. Sure, he had committed a murder, he thought, but fully justified, pushed beyond his limit, and betrayed on so many levels. Who wouldn't? He often found himself on Fifth Avenue, at the window of his bookstore, as the winter diminished, spring ended, and summer began. In the window, scarlet streets taunted him. The book bragged to him how it was an even greater smash since the prostitute author was murdered. Lonnie paced his castle tower well into the night. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. He now knew he had written a bestseller, but he couldn't claim it. He also had writer's block, but knew why. Julia had taken his creative mind and died with it, stolen it, as she had said. She had taken who he was somehow, his talent. But no worries. He knew how to get his creativity back. This only made sense. He grinned to himself. That's it? What greater power than talent? And I'll have plenty. The woman lying in front of Lonnie had published not one, but 4 novels. He had followed her down the dark streets of Brooklyn. And it wasn't difficult, with a little chloroform, to get her back to his castle. She was now tucked safely away within the basement crypt. His parents' bodies lay resting near her in the gray stones, their mouths aghast, eyes open. They lay in graves covered with a clear, glass-like resin. Tossing notepaper to the girl, he demanded she write. Later, he would take the notes to his garret tower and plink away on his Smith Corona. Plink, plink, plink. But this wasn't enough. Only by piercing his eyes into the depth of her creative mind, fusing his eyes with hers in an inexorable transformation, could the process work. He strapped her down on her back and lay prone against the top of her, her soft warmth compressed against him. He sensed her terror. "Don't blink," he begged, digging into her pupils with his own. "The windows are your soul," he pleaded. "I must meet you at exactly the right moment, the moment your eyes go dead." He tightened his hands ever so slowly on her throat, saving the moment, perfecting, staring. As the girl's eyes died, he could feel her talent moving to his own mind exquisitely. The tiny angels of a sentient being joined him, the ice crystals, the snow. Once completed, he could feel his creativity soaring. He couldn't wait to go to his garret, couldn't wait to join his Smith Corona. But first, some business. This was only Wout, a respect. He honored her with her own place and lay her carefully, lovingly, he felt, in an open grave, the row his parents lay in. Covering her with clear resin, she formed a sanctuary of her own, her face aghast, mouth open, eyes seemingly aware. But even while doing so, he tried not to dwell on the acid in his stomach. The burst of talent she'd given him would play out. When the time came, he knew there was only one way to refill his creativity. The snow talked to him, beckoned him on. The crystal angels. Oh, muse. Oh, catharsis. My legs were on fire by the time they left the ground. I surged upward like a spark, stretching my arms toward the ceiling, grabbing, reaching. I landed hard on my calloused soles. Once more, then, I leapt, gaining height. The third jump took me higher still, and as I returned to the floor, catching sight of myself in the mirror, I rolled my whole body downward. I found a strange foundation there in the scuffed surface, and I allowed this discovery to take root in the depths of my stomach. It tugged me to the ground like a magnet, providing momentum as I sank. I felt my whole body contort with it, bending in half, caught, flailing like a moth in a web. "Stop! Stop!" His voice echoed sharply off the white walls, the beating of a mighty drum. It startled me out of my panting half-trance, and Louisa, the stage manager, a severe, spectacled woman in a beige blouse, reached out a hand to pause the tape player. The music, that music, driving, discordant, utterly electric, screeched to an abrupt halt. There was silence. Tugging down my shirt, I averted my gaze from the mirror and extended one leg, gently trying to loosen my muscles. But booming in that same voice, the voice of the giant that he was, he rose from his chair and began to circle me like a desert bird. "You're dragging, Hector," he said. "You're descending into the earth too slowly. You understand? You lack impetus." His words rattled his throat as though it were an iron cage. "The dance is precise. That is the challenge of it, yes? It looks wild. It feels wild when you are in it, I know. But it is precise. It is specific. Every motion has intention. 1, 2, 3. He slammed his foot with each word, punctuating them with the thump, thump, thump of his shoe. He rocked his pelvis down, trying to mime for me what exactly I was ruining. And while he could no longer exert himself the way he could in his youth, I saw the whisper of strength in his limbs. The dancer, the echo of the titan he once and still was. At that moment, I hated myself for dancing badly. Really, the only thing worse than dancing badly is knowing that you are dancing badly, that others can tell you are dancing badly. I never imagined I would dance badly before Dimitri Lamoureux. I never imagined I would be dancing this piece before Dimitri Lamoureux. Choreographer, director, writer, living legend. He had, in his prime, created 6 variations of what he called human dramas with music. Not quite musicals, but real, honest-to-God works of art. And in my mind, they still towered over the blockbusters dominating Broadway at the time. Louisa, his longtime collaborator, had worked on every premiere and some revivals, such as this one. Lucky her. Lamoureux had practically invented a new language of movement, a language which would inspire crude imitation after crude imitation. Yet nothing compared. He had flown close to some secret glory, some cosmic thing that no other artist had ever even glimpsed. He was Icarus, never fallen, and I was just me, stupid, out-of-work me. Through dumb luck, I never believed they really liked me in that singing prescription pill commercial. I would actually get to perform No Place, the No Place, that seminal solo dance from Human Drama with Music Number 1, Catabasis. It was not quite a featured 20-minute dream ballet. No. In fact, it had been described by at least one critic as a night terror. Primal, cerebral, something that burrowed into a person's head. It was a career maker, though. The role of the dancer had no dialogue, and sure, it spent most of the show backstage. I hadn't even rehearsed with the rest of the cast yet, but if I could step out and command the room for just 6 minutes and 18 seconds, I would get to do this and nothing but this forever, until my body gave out. And I wanted that more than anything. I saw a grainy recording of No Place on PBS as a child. Flipping through the channels in that little apartment, my knees digging into the living room carpet, I paused as a lone figure emerged onto a darkened stage. Dressed in gray fabric, hunched in a solitary white spotlight, his body heaved with bracing breaths. Ignited by a swell of wind and the crash of drums, he spun in a circle before bending backward completely, with a flexibility I could only hope to one day possess. With each movement, though, with each count, I found myself drawing closer and closer until I was practically pressed flush against the screen, near enough that I could feel the cold static pricking the skin of my face. Poised like that, I extended both my arms outward and began crudely mirroring the dancer's steps. "Back up, Hector. How many times do I gotta tell you? You're gonna burn your goddamn eyes out," my father growled. Coming up behind me, he ripped the remote from my hands and changed the channel. He barked at me for blocking the picture, but I had already seen the dance. I had seen it, and having seen it, I craved it, like I had tasted blood. And from that day forward, I devoured TV listings whenever I found them, flipped through magazines in grocery stores, or turned on the guide channel to let it roll. Blue in the static dark, searching, hoping it would appear again. I had asked my mother for lessons once, I remember, but she never really gave me an answer. I think she hoped I would simply forget. Not because she didn't want me to have them, no, but because he wouldn't have wanted me to. I had overheard one morning a suggestion that he would smash my toes if he caught me standing on them, like a ballerina. I figured she had broached the subject. Either way, they aired the recording of Catabasis again in the autumn, very late at night, long past the hour I would be in bed, or sensible people would be watching. But I had planned for it. For weeks, I had been saving wherever I could. Change from lunch, or from errands to the corner store. Standing in the doorway to my bedroom, one eye on the alarm clock, I, knowing I couldn't be late, clutched the blank VHS tape to my chest. I had scrounged up just enough to buy it for this singular, solemn purpose. I had made this walk many, many times. The long corridor past my parents' bedroom to the living room. And I knew, by then, that I had to take the trek in threes, extending my legs every third step to avoid the spots where the floor creaked. I listened to my father's snoring, holding my breath as I moved, 3 by 3, avoiding the noise, avoiding the discovery, only to take off running as soon as I felt carpet. Hurrying to the television, I muted it with the remote before shoving the tape into the VCR. And as soon as I was sure that little red light was blinking, I watched. Yeah, I watched. And I mirrored the silent movements as if compelled, as if called. And while I didn't learn to dance for real until high school, when I could spend more time outside the house, I did dance for real that night. I hid the tape in a corner of my closet and snuck it out again and again, whenever the opportunity arose, until it broke and I couldn't even rewind it anymore. I'm sorry. I'm in my head. I can do it, I said at last, speaking to Lamoureux in the mirror of the rehearsal room. I shifted my eyes to the floor, but he pulled up my chin, forcing me to look at myself. I know you can, Hector. We saw it in your audition. Do that. Shall we run the section again? Louisa asked. Her finger hovered over the tape player. No. I'm tired of sections. We've been doing nothing but sections. Let's weave them together now. He needs to feel the full scope. Yes? He locked eyes with my reflection. You can do the full piece? From the top? I nodded, because I did not know what else to do. And I realized in that moment that, more than anything, I wanted to impress him. I didn't want him to regret entrusting me, of all the dancers in the world, with this most sacred thing. And so I lapsed into my pre-routine. Walking in a circle, the wood cold beneath my feet, I counted my steps in 3s, stretching my legs at every 3rd, out of habit or tradition or superstition. I rolled my hands downward next, running my pointer finger along each of my toes, counting out all 10 before taking my place before the mirror. Lamoureux settled back in his chair with a grunt, and turning to Louisa, I gave a nod. She pressed a few buttons, and with a low analog whir, the music began. I exhaled, my whole chest heaving, and counting to myself, I began. Turning, whirling, writhing, I bent myself backward, stretching my entire torso. Lamoureux, too, began keeping time, stomping away with his foot, watching every movement I made, driving me forward, taking hold of the energy I was hurling out into the space. Thump, 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 thump. Each beat seeped into me, filling the pores of my thrashing body and setting my muscles ablaze. I blinked, and at first, I was not even sure I had seen it. It began as something of a flicker of light, a vague shadow over my left shoulder, almost a smudge on the mirror. The music hastened, and Lamoureux thumped time. and as if keeping up with it, the thing in the glass moved. I spun too, and it seemed to spin with me. But locked into the dance, I did not stop to look. No, I spun. And I spun lost completely. And with each turn, the shape seemed to take more solid form until I, facing the mirror, panting, aching, could see it, really see it. Skeletal limbs, impossibly long, arachnid almost, pulsed with tendons and throbbing red veins. It swayed back and forth, collapsing and contorting in on itself, creating and uncreating, almost imitating my movement, but stretching them to the mocking brink. It was a figure, a rotting husk, forged as if from teeth and flesh and living darkness. It moved in a way nothing I had ever seen moved. Choreographed chaos. A star imploding in on itself. A jellyfish. And yet, a man bending completely in half, twitching. It flipped its torso upside down, and its swollen head smacked the floor with a sickening, wet crunch. Somewhere beneath the thumping, I thought I could hear a raw, splintering noise, one that could burrow into a person's skull, digging like claws through grave dirt. Its spine had shattered, I thought. It had snapped itself in half, and yet continued to move. Beneath the music, I could hear the sick, screeching grind of bone on bone. Thump, thump, thump. I leapt, then just as I had leapt before, unable to stop. I stretched my arms upward, once, twice, 3 times. The thing leapt with me, limbs flailing, fingers breaking, twisting and cracking as it furled them toward the ceiling. I cried out, landing hard on the floor, traveling too far in the final leap, plummeting askew. The illusion broke. I rolled upward, legs burning, trying to catch my breath. I almost thought I would vomit. And when I looked, there was nothing in the mirror. Oh, why don't we take a break? Louisa was the one to crack the strange stillness that settled over us. Her voice firm as she stood from her chair and pierced the catacomb that the rehearsal room had become. Step into the hallway, Hector. Are you all right? Do you need me to file an injury report? Why don't you get some water? I was working too hard, I thought, as I slumped against the wall in the corridor. Closing my eyes, I took a long swig from my bottle, using the back of my hand to wipe away the layer of sweat that now drenched my brow. The shape in the mirror flashed into my thoughts like a thundercrack. I winced. There had been nothing there, I decided. Of course there had been nothing there. Nobody else had reacted, so there had been nothing there. An absent-minded hand came down to rub my knee through my tights, and for a moment, I was a little kid again. I could feel the living room carpet digging into my bare legs as I let my thoughts drift to to that apartment, to my mother, to my father, and to that low-quality VHS recording, to the countless nights I spent caught in the dull glow of the television, dancing in the dark. Louisa came to collect me 15 minutes later, and as I stepped back into the rehearsal room, assuring her I was just fine, I saw that she had taped a wide blue circle onto the floor. "You traveled too far last time," Lamoureux said from his perch. I had Louisa mark the edges of the stage. It's shaped like a disc. You must stay within the circle, understand? Are you ready to try again? Yes, but I was just thinking. I mean, sitting out there, I know why I'm falling behind. I first saw this piece on television, the PBS recording, you know, hundreds of times, and the dancer only jumps once. During the climax, I mean, he only jumps once. I'm jumping 3 times, I explained. It throws off the next measure for me, so I'm behind the music, and then I rush. Louisa dropped her script on the floor, interrupting me and catching Lamoureux's attention. He looked back to me after a moment. "I remember that dancer from the recording," he said. "He was a last-minute replacement. He was not like you. He lacked stamina. He lacked strength. Could not do all 3 jumps and keep going, so we had to alter it. The cameras were already there, and the show must go on, yes? But you have the ability to perform the piece as conceived, Hector. It's why we chose you. 3 jumps. Forget what you know." Watching him, I felt something strange fluttering in my stomach. Maybe it was nausea. Maybe it was embarrassment at him trying to flatter me. But it was enough. I walked my circle of 3s, counted my toes, and straightened up. And looking at Louisa, I gave a nod. The music began. It was different this time, I thought. My whole body struck by a new momentum. I lurched to the left and then to the right, writhing downward, finding each moment, each breath, each precise movement. Lamoureux was not thumping, and while I only caught glimpses of him as I spun, something odd bubbled across his face. Excitement, maybe, or pleasure, and I had done it, I thought. I had danced before the master, and at last I had done it well. Still, I found that I dared not look in the mirror. Not really. Dared not allow my eyes to focus too long on my reflection, lest I see the mover. Some part of me, even then, thought maybe it was still lurking there. I jumped. Once, twice, 3 times, extending my arms, my feet finding the floor as I plummeted down, sinking into the earth. I rolled, discovering that solid foundation again, finishing the dance with one final gasp as the music surged and ended in a cacophony. I had done it, panting, soaked, breathless. I looked up, then my limbs ablaze. I looked up, And there simply was no mirror. In its place, there was only an unbroken wall of black, an abyss. Something moved within it, though, dancing through the void, crunching, whirling, twisting, and thumping. I watched it now, watched the way it transfigured itself. It was almost divine. Some odd part of my brain thought, the way it moved, like nothing else had ever moved. Stunning, yes? Lamoureux said, coming up behind me as I knelt there. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Louisa joined him, and all three of us looked. Do not be afraid. It dwells there in the dark. No man in no place. Yes, always there, I think, just beyond what we can see, at least until we descend into it ourselves. He laughed. Do not look for the dead in the glass. You will not like it. He squeezed my arm. The dance, exactly as devised. 3 jumps when not in public performance, thins the veils, allows us to see. A ritual, if you like. Are we artists, not magicians? And David danced before the Lord with all his might. Louisa and I have not seen in a long time. But I can no longer dance like you. What is it? I asked hoarsely. Do I know? A muse? It moves like the breath of the universe, walks the edge of it, an echo of what has always been. Maybe God. Reductive, but to filter even one part of it for mortal eyes, to be able to imitate some whisper of its aspect. Transcendent. Look, it's choreographing our next masterpiece. I don't understand. Inspiration chooses, Hector. It chose me. He ducked down to speak into my ear. I knew when you gushed about that videotape at your audition. Catabasis has never been recorded for broadcast. Why then did you and only you see it? How? To learn. My eyes widened. So be its filter, be its mirror, be sainted. I rose. I watched. My legs burned. Lamoureux had chosen me because it had chosen me. Yes, I thought. Yes, I wanted it. Me. Out of work, me. The filter. Chosen. I danced.